know how I let myself get into this. I must be a complete masochist. I mean, it's one thing for a critic to talk to a director, or a critic to talk to an actor, or a critic to talk to a writer, but to talk to someone who is all three of these things, who's an actress, a writer, and a director, is really overwhelming. I don't think I would have gotten into the ring with Liv Ullman, except for an interview we did almost 20 years ago, when Scenes from a Marriage opened in New York, and I was a reviewer for the Village Voice then, and I went to see her at the Pierre, and we just began talking, and it was as if we'd known each other our whole lives. And I wrote this interview. It went on and on and on, and I thought, well, they'll never print this, and they printed the whole thing, and it was a cover story, and everybody said, she's so intelligent. Nobody could believe. I mean, in America, no actor or actress could be that articulate for that long. And I thought it was somehow my unique power to have drawn her out this way, but then I read subsequent interviews with her, and she was just as articulate, and she always had something new and interesting to say. So she really is a spectacular person to talk to. And then today we met again for the first time since then, and it was as if no time had passed, and we were right back where we'd started from. And isn't it astonishing to you to think it was 20 years ago that we did that interview?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, looking at you.
We haven't matured at all, right? Is that it? But anyway, it's very exciting for me to be here with her today. What's interesting now is to look back at the films. We've got about 5 clips of up to and including Sophie, her first feature, the first feature she herself has directed, and which was shown here last night. And in looking at the clips, not only to get your thoughts on making them and what it was like working with Bergman, working with Jan Troell, but in retrospect, as a now director, what you absorbed from them, what of Bergman or Troell you took, what you rejected. I was reading your book, your second book, Choices, today, and you talk about this was when you were just directing your first the section of Love in Canada. And for the first time, you'd taken over the reins, and you said to somebody, well, they better watch out now because I'm going to get revenge for all the frustration that I suffered as an actress. So you might even be thinking, as we're looking at them, what were some of the frustrations that you did experience in those? And, of course, your career as a woman. This is a really extraordinary thing, particularly for us in this country, I think. In France, it's not uncommon for actresses to go into directing. There are several films, Christine Pascal, Diane Carisse actually had a very brief theater career, but Nicole Garcia, Brigitte Rouen, a number of women have gone from acting into directing, but no one that I know of has been both actress and writer and director. So we'll start, I guess, appropriately with Persona, which was your first film, wasn't it? Or your first with Bergman?
Well, it wasn't my first film, actually. I'd been an actress at the National Theatre in Norway, yes, for 7 years before, and I'd done 6 or 7 Norwegian films and a couple of Swedish films. But because he was a man and he was a genius, I was like born there in the view of other people.
In the view of other people, you didn't hear that part of it. Well, was it true? He said somewhere that he had been working with B.B. Anderson, and you and B.B. were friends, I think, and maybe you were doing something in the theater together. And there was a snapshot of the two of you in sunlight, and he looked and he was struck by the similarity of your faces.
Well, what really happened was B.B. and I had done a film together in the north of Norway from a book of Knut Hamsun. And I came to visit Bibi afterwards in Stockholm, and we were walking on the street, and like in all these books, this really happened to me. There came Ingmar Bergman, and he had worked a lot with Bibi, and I was just absolutely numb. I couldn't do anything. I just stood beside her and blushed and hoped, he wouldn't speak to me, and he didn't speak to me. But afterwards I got a letter saying that he was preparing this film, which later became Hour of the Wolf, but very differently, and would I have a small part in it.
This was Hour of the Wolf he was talking about.
Yes, something like Hour of the Wolf,
Yeah.
although it wasn't similar to that script. And so I said yes, and by letter. And just after that, he became very ill and had to go to the hospital. So the film was cancelled, and Bibi and I went to Poland and Czechoslovakia instead to see theater. And while we were in Czechoslovakia, we got a telegram from Bergman saying, "Come back, I'm going to make another film." And while he was at the hospital, he had been looking at a photograph of Bibi and me from this film we did in Norway, and he had been struck by the likeness. And as ill as he was, and he probably wasn't ill at all, he just didn't want to do the other film, he decided to make a film based on the likeness, strange likeness between these two women. And in a week or two, he actually got the idea and wrote Persona, and we had to come home from Czechoslovakia in a car and start filming.
Well, we'll talk about some interesting things that happened then, but for those of you who haven't seen it, everyone has probably seen it, but this is this fierce psychological duel between two women, and Liv Ullman plays an actress who in the beginning of the film suddenly makes a vow of silence to herself that she will not speak anymore. And Bibi Andersson is the nurse Alma, very eager to please, trying to oblige, who's sent with her to this island. I guess that was Faro, where it was filmed.
Yeah.
And it's almost it's one of these relationships almost like an analyst and a patient, where the analyst is quiet and the patient just keeps talking and talking and talking. So this very strange kind of psychological crossover occurs. And this is a scene I think a lot of critics have felt this is one of the more erotic scenes ever filmed in movies. And it's the scene in which Bibi Andersson describes a sexual encounter, and Liv Ullman being silent through the whole film. It's the most extraordinary job of acting by someone who never says a word. And we're seeing the scene not only through Bibi's eyes, but as Liv Ullman is listening to it. So we'll have that clip from Persona now, Patrick. Still, that scene is still one of the most powerful things I've ever seen, and it's because you don't see anything.
Well, what's actually a shocking thing to start with, really. But what happened not long after that, Bibi, after it had opened in the United States, Bibi and I were in New York, and we did an interview on TV with Dick Cavett. And he asked us, well, how did it feel to have this love scene together, being naked and have a love scene with another woman? And we said, we didn't do that. Yes, you did. And he wouldn't give up. He had seen that we were naked and had a love scene together. And that's, it's it's just like Hitchcock. Everybody who's seen the shower scene in Psycho, they believe that they have seen that Janet Leigh was stabbed.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, you never see the murder. But it's your fantasy, which is always a brilliant way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, also this idea, and I think it was Bergman that said this somewhere, talking about the way you act during that scene. It's like your eye. It's incredibly subtle, and yet it's like your lips got fuller. There was something sort of flushed and full as you were enjoying this thing vicariously, this vicarious experience of it. It was amazing. But to begin with, it is sort of a strange thing to start the evening with, but it's somehow...
Who made the choices?
No, I'm responsible for everything. It's not fair. It's just one that I used to illustrate in talking about eroticism in the cinema, and how less is often more, and how what is just, first of all, it's voyeurism at three removes, really, because it's Bibi telling of a story, and her halting, and her personality coming into it, and it's like, I was just looking at a film by Diane Courice, Entre Nous, which you may have seen, and there's a scene where she has a love scene with a soldier, and she tells her friend afterwards, it's a very impersonal sex, and she tells her friend afterwards about it, and first of all, it's women having this, it's the idea is that men like impersonal sex and women don't, and yet these are two scenes that I think women very much understand, in which women are getting turned on by this idea of impersonal sex, and it's turning on not only her, but your character. But this was, didn't you start the film with some difficulty and then kind of get into it as time went on? Or?
Well, in the beginning, I was still shy and didn't talk, and luckily in the film I don't talk either. But Bergman has said later that, the first few days he was a little scared. What have I done? I made this plan to make this picture and wrote it in 14 days, and here is this Norwegian who doesn't talk and blushes all the time. But then it went wonderful, and because although, and I must say I was only 25 at the time, and I was playing a woman much more mature than I, an actress who had decided that she didn't want to talk anymore because she felt that words had been misused so much, also in her case. And I didn't understand the complications of all this, although I understand it today much more. But I instinctively understood one thing, and that was that Ingmar was in the soul of this lady. And because I, without words, really understood a lot about him or recognized a lot about him, I knew I'll just be him. So, I just tried to listen with my inner ear to who he was. And that's why he stopped using really Max von Sydow to be him in films, and he started to have a woman doing these parts. Because except for Scenes from a Marriage, I think I very much was the soul.
His alter ego.
Of Bergman.
Well, and we'll get back to more Bergman later, but to go to The Immigrants, that was a film that you did with Jean Troel in '73, I think. Did you do two versions of that, one in Swedish and one in English, or did you just dub the Swedish version?
No, that was only done in one version. We did two films. We did The Immigrants and The New Land, and we did them simultaneously.
You did?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So one day I was 17, and the next day I was giving birth to the child number 10 or whatever. and our difficulty was really with the children, because she was either pregnant or giving birth, and we had to know, all the time, how big is her stomach today and what child, because the stomach was supposed to go up and down depending on age, and
the continuity
of that film
headache.
was really difficult. And you can see strange continuity things, for example, with the costumes. When the immigrants come to America for the first time and land in New York, you will see, and they see a black man for the first time. And you will see that he has wooden clogs from Sweden, So the costume lady had not done her research very well.
Did that stay in the film?
Oh, yeah, he had to. Where he was despairing often in editing. He told us, because of this, very much because of the costume lady, who is wonderful, but she really didn't do her homework the way other people did. Because if I was to wear worn clothes, she would come to the breakfast table some days and said, "Oh, I slept in the clothes tonight, so they will really look a little worn, And then I had to wear them that whole day. She had really very strange.
Well, this is a leave-taking scene. Do you want to maybe give the background of this particular scene when you're leaving?
Well, we worked there. Many people, when they think of Sweden and Swedish directors, they think of Ingmar Bergman. But even he says that if he ever stranded on an island and could have only one film for the rest of his life, he would want to have This Is Your Life, which is the first film made by this genius. He's really a genius, Jan Troell, who's both a cinematographer and a director. But he's very shy. He doesn't really know how to speak or explain what he wants. But because he's the cinematographer and he also is the operator of the camera, that's where he does the poetry. And we never really knew. He let us walk around the way we wanted and, fix the acting, because he felt he's good actors and they can do their thing. But what he did with his camera, it was like a painter. With his camera, he would make the music. And we never knew if he was on the face or the hands or the feet or anything. And this scene we are seeing now, when they leave for America, the husband and the wife and their children, in the script, you know, you read, it's the scene where they wave, they're sitting in the carriage with the children and they're waving to the old parents who are left standing behind the gate, and they're seeing them obviously for the last time in their life to go to the new land. And I thought, oh, this is really going to be moving. I'm sure now his camera's going to be on close-up of me all the time, because I was famous for, you know, how to be sad at the appropriate moments. And, you know, when we saw the rushes, saw the scene as he had seen, you know, he knew so much more and had made such a much better choice, the way I remember it. I haven't seen it for many years. Because he showed also the reason for these people leaving. He let the camera wander on the fields, and the fields of corn, the corn was sparse, and you just saw the stones and all the hardship that these people really had to leave, the poverty. And he showed the tiny, tiny parents. They were so tiny, and you could see that they were left forever. It is so moving, the vision he gives of a goodbye forever, which is so different than just going into a face and showing tears. No, I hope I'm not misremembering, and that's what we see.
Okay, Patrick, we'll see that clip now. That is an incredible shot, that zoom and then the dissolve, that overlapping is really very powerful.
And you know, the strange thing, a lot of this movie was done in the areas around here, and what you found, the Swedish part was done in Skåne in Sweden, but what we found was that the nature was so similar here as there, and you knew why the immigrants choose this land, because it was like home. And we literally could do scenes, you know, where we went into the woods, and on one side of a tree we filmed it in Sweden, and on the other side we were here, and you can't see the difference.
Yeah. And this is where they were supposed to have settled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll find, I'm sure even in this cinema today, a lot of their ancestors.
Yeah.
I think.
One that I wanted to show now, but the print was dubbed. I mean, this is your own dubbing, but this print was The Passion of Anna, and it was not well dubbed. But it's interesting, it's right after this that Bergman made this, and it's very sort of modernistic. It's the one where the actors speak to the camera and describe their parts. Max von Sydow plays a character named Andreas Winkelmann, and you have previously been married to someone named Andreas who's had a terrible accident, and you're having nightmares. And there's one scene which we were going to show where you have this long monologue in a boat where you're telling the story of your marriage, which you tell in sort of glowing beatific terms and apparently honest. I mean, it's impossible to sort of look at you and not believe you. And then in the end, the rug is pulled out from under this, and it turns out that that you've actually, I mean, the marriage was terrible, and that he's left you, or there's been a rupture. It's a very violent film too. There's tremendous. This is the one that takes place on an island, and at one point a whole bunch of animals are slaughtered, and a man commits suicide because everyone thinks he's done it. So there's just tremendous both physical and psychic violence in the film. But what's interesting is how you seem to be one thing, and then you're revealed to be something very different. And I think that happens in a lot of the Bergman films with you. He captures something there that's very deceptive in you.
In the character, not
in the not in you. Yeah. Well, first of all, going back to he had seen you in this photograph with Bibi, but what was your previous? Did he draw on your previous roles, or did he sort of envision you in a completely other way than you had been before? I mean, this idea that you suddenly were the person who was known for emoting on the screen or being anguished. Where did that come from?
Well, that came from him, because I hadn't been anguished that way in any film before.
Yeah.
Certainly. But I know that he recognized it in me, or my capacity to do that, and it was both my wonderful luck, of course, to meet a filmmaker like that, who really felt he could use me, but it was also in some ways not only luck, because it meant that for all the years I worked with him, although I did other work also, this of course was the most important, that only one side of
it froze
what I
you
felt
in that
I
image,
could do for people, yes, because I'm basically a much more happy person, and I'm much more in harmony with womanhood than his characters are. But then on the other hand, his characters are more a reflection on him. So maybe I at times felt, specifically afterwards, I wonder what my life would have been like if I could have projected more positive images, or more images like scenes from a marriage, because I like that character. Then always talk about the neurosis of a woman inside. Actually, my philosophy is it's not as important to me as it obviously is to him. And then to be the media, the vehicle for this, the spokesperson for that is sometimes a little burden. Frustration. Yeah, because I've done so many other things, but
that's what everyone remembers. They're so vivid and so stark.
Yeah.
Well, Scenes from a Marriage is actually, though, more. I mean, Erland Josephson would be more the Bergman character in that to some depth.
Yes, I feel. Yes, so I am sure.
You're a little freer in that to be yourself.
Much freer, because it's the only movie I feel where Bergman really shows a woman that has difficulty coping with life, and then she overcomes it and works with it. It's not, some suffering inside of her, but it's really life presenting itself to her, and her then, working with that, coping with that. And I just...
Yeah, it's less him sort of confronting the universe than confronting marriage. I mean, one of the things is the format, because originally it was, of course, made for Swedish television in how many, 10 parts?
Well, it was always thought of to be a film in the end, I think, but it was financed, like all his movies, almost by Swedish television. So he first had to give it to them, and it was made in a 6 episodes.
6.
Each was 1 hour, and believe it or not, we did the whole 6 hours in 6 weeks. And we did again everything in Fårö and in a barn that he had made into a film studio. And Erland and I, we had to learn our text very quickly. We met each morning at 4 or 5 just to go through the dialogue. It was really hard work. And it was cold because it was in Ireland, although it was summer, and we had, this was not Hollywood, we had a dressing room where we had to change and do everything like a tiny little caravan, just really small, in the garden of his very wonderful house. Where he was with his wife. And actually this house which he once built for me, but this was of course many years after. So and Erland and I, because we were tired and we were frustrated, and we felt to do such a big movie in 6 weeks conditions. Just because we could learn text, he was making this cheap production. So we had a wonderful time, sitting in our caravan between takes and bad-mouthing him and bitching about him. And I can remember, and we were allowed to go into the big house only if we had to use the ladies' room. And I can remember once had been there, and I was coming back to our caravan, and I had thought of something wonderful to say, and so I rushed into the caravan, into the door here, and Erland is sitting there, and I say, you won't believe it, she's reading, magazines in the toilet, because I'd found a magazine. And I went on and on, but Erland, my play friend, he was looking so strange, and so I turned, and there is Ingmar sitting, and with a smile. Oh, I was so scared. And I just said, I will not survive this. And I was this, I'm not going to survive. And I ran out, and I didn't know where to run. It's an island. I couldn't. So I found on the somewhere behind the house there was where they put wood in the winter, and I just crept in there and put the lid on. And I decided I'm never coming out.
It just disappeared.
Yes, and everybody was coming, opening the lid and say, you have to come out. He's not. And I didn't dare to come out. And finally, Ingmar came and knocked on the lid because they had told him she's never coming out. And he says what he will never understand, that not only did he have to come and knock on the lid, he also had to say, I'm sorry.
That must have been a great achievement.
And I think that's the only time he said, I'm sorry.
In your whole relationship.
And he hadn't done a thing. What?
Was there a little bit of sadism in that, in him putting you in this situation? Or
No, because he didn't know that we were bad-mouthing him all the time. He thought we were worshipping him.
Well, this is, as you'll remember, the story of this marriage, and it's breaking up, and all the vicissitudes they go through. And this is the scene where Erland Josephson is leaving for another woman. And the strange thing is, I remember this scene as one in which you packed his suitcase to go.
Didn't I?
I thought so, but it's not in this clip. I don't know where it is, but we'll see, because I remembered it that way. Several people that I talked to remembered it that way.
So do I.
All right, well, it must have... either we're misremembering it, or it got...
Or it's like Dick Cavett. We think we've seen something, which is...
Okay, Patrick, the clip. I'm sure that part that you did pack the suitcase, though, it's just gotten clipped out.
This is the movie version, and you must have seen a TV version too, because it's a much longer scene at the breakfast table, and then she does go and pack his suitcase. These strange self-destructive things you do sometimes when you are a woman, or when you are left, or you're scared of losing somebody, you say and you do things that are completely
having this
irrational.
very polite conversation at breakfast and talking about all the things as if they were going to be together forever.
Right.
Well, I remember talking to you about this at the time, and how people would have arguments about, I think in Sweden and also in the U.S., have arguments about the film and disagreements, and some men would say, well, how can he leave her? She's so beautiful. And I told you this, and you said, well, of course he could look at her. She's just walking around with these glasses, and she's plain and pathetic and sort of holding on to him, and you felt that she really was very unattractive and undesirable.
Because she isn't honest with who she is. She's a little like Nora in Ibsen's Doll's House. She's whining, and she's saying, oh, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? Instead of, doing this and saying, shame on you, what you're going to do now.
Or instead of getting enraged. She finally breaks down after he leaves, but she never does to him. Well, also what's interesting, and we talked about this before, and it's very clear, we couldn't show this clip, it would just take up too much time, but there's a scene in the very end of the film where she and Josephson have a temporary reconciliation, and she's having a nightmare, and he's consoling her, and they have a wonderful conversation. There's been this running thing all the way through where she wants to always talk about they're in bed at night, and she wants to talk about the relationship, and he just wants to go to sleep, like so many couples. This is the sort of ongoing battle that the minute the woman wants to talk about the relationship, the man can't. He needs no sleeping pills. He's asleep. But in this scene, she looks fantastic. You look fantastic in that last scene, and it's like what happens to certain women sometimes after their husbands die, or they suddenly come into their own. And she's just absolutely transformed. Suddenly, your hair is free, and you look free. There's a sort of light in your eyes that isn't in the earlier scenes, and there's a complete kind of transformation.
Well, I think, for everyone, not only women, but they experience it sometimes more, also men. Once you start to rely on your own strength, and once you start to say yes to what is you, and not only yes to what is somebody else's version of life, you do start blooming. You bloom in a wonderful way, much more than today, when women, in a false sense, I think, of liberation, they start trying to bloom by facelifts and aerobics and so. And again, we have failed this one thing where we really should do something with ourselves. And
It's strength within. It's using the female language. It's using everything that is descriptive of feminine values.
And that's it. And yeah, and finding that you are a whole person, that you're not half of a unit, but a whole person.
Right.
And that's what she finds.
Because sometimes women in marriages, and I've been so myself, and Marianne there in this film certainly was so, she's not even half of a person. She's a quarter of a person, and she's presenting this thing which isn't her at all, and which of course to a man in the end is burdensome. If she's presenting this to be loved, she's not going to be loved by it.
Because she hasn't loved herself. She can't love herself.
No, she doesn't love herself. Yeah. And who wants a whiner, you know?
Speaking of whiners, Autumn Sonata, the film that you made with Ingrid Bergman, and this is a fascinating. I'm using quite a lot from this film, but two scenes here. One is Ingrid Bergman is, of course, the mother concert pianist who's lived all over the world and very little with her daughter, who comes back, and there's a showdown between mother and daughter. But the two scenes here, one is the one where they're at the piano together, and the other is, I guess we'll show it right after that, the confrontation scene.
Well, that is interesting, and actually I told a story last time I was in Minnesota, but it's worth repeating, hoping that other people are here today. Because when Ingmar wrote the script of Autumn Sonata, he wrote a script about a woman who had said yes to herself, and she was a pianist and had traveled a lot playing piano in concerts while her children were small. And then the daughter that I play, continuously in life until she's 40 years old, which she is in this film, whines and whines of this mother who left her so often alone when she was little. And well, that was maybe bad, but at 40 you should stop whining and blame your mother, I feel. And both Ingrid and I, who were both women who had been working all our lives, we found that it was very unfair to have a script like that where the working mother was made into some terrible person, and the daughter was made into this sweet person who was destroyed. Because if it had been a man, I mean, this was written by a man who's hardly said good night to his children. And you know, just because it's a woman, he wrote it. And we said, could you kind of change a little the words, because it isn't fair. No. And then we said, well, can we act against our characters a little? And he said, sure, that's interesting, you are actresses. And so we really did act very much against the characters that were in the script. You know, I made my 40-year-old with pigtails often and this whiny voice, and Ingrid gave a lot of integrity and strength to her character. But there was one scene, and I think that's the second scene we see, where the daughter goes on all night and whining, saying, oh, you did this to me, and terrible. And she is frustrated, you know, very frustrated and very upset. And in the end, when the morning comes and the daughter finally shuts up, you know, the mother has like two lines, and it is, please hold around me, please love me. And actually, when I read that, I thought, oh, this is beautiful. I wish I could say this, because it would be so moving. And so I was looking forward to hear Ingrid do that scene. So we did all my scene first, a long monologue, pages and pages. And finally, then, Ingrid was, after having heard this the whole night, how terrible she had been, her scene was to be, please hold around me, please love me. But then when we come to this, Ingrid says, I can't say that. I want to slap her in the face and leave the room. And it was fantastic. And Ingmar got so upset because we had promised not to interfere with the lines, you know. And he said, well, you have to say it. And she said, I'm not doing it. And they started quarreling, and so they went out in the corridor, and we heard these voices. And we thought, you know, nobody had said no to Ingmar before. He's the genius. We all knew that. And we thought the picture is going to be over, everything is finished. And finally it became quiet in the corridor, and The two of them came in. He had won. He was the genius. She was the woman. And she was to say the lines. And I don't know if it's still there. I hope it is there. She did say the lines. Please hold around me. Please love me. Forgive me everything. But her face is the face of women who in generations have had to say, I'm sorry I exist, I'm sorry I did this, I'm sorry I did that, I'm sorry I can't be all these roles at once. It's the face of a woman who is so angry, but she knows the ritual demands of her. Continue to say, I'm sorry. And it's Ingrid Bergman. For me, it's so historic, and she's so much better than what I think Ingmar would ever have expected.
That's so interesting, because I had strong reservations about this film for precisely those reasons, but I always felt that maybe you were on his side, that it was maybe the two of you ganging up against Ingrid Bergman.
No.
Because I did feel that this whole issue of the mother, why isn't she entitled to some honor for this career that she's had? But she's being punished all the way through.
And the strange thing, who does he pick to do these two roles? He picks two women who are famous for, traveling around doing career stuff, with their children. And Ingrid has always been with her children in spite of what the newspapers were
And you have been
writing.
a very conscientious mother as well. So to but this is the way guilt is induced in women, is this idea that they're never quite adequate to the task of mothering. But there is this brilliant, the first scene also is one in which everything is done through the eyes, I think, of the piano playing scene, and every child will recognize.
Yes, because we also have to say that there are strong women often who are so perfect, they feel, in what they do, that they literally, by just being so good at it, that they really push down the child, in their kindness, showing that.
Well, I think also, I've just been reviewing this book on Marlene Dietrich by her daughter, Maria Riva, and it's a fascinating book. But the thing is, and of course, as you might expect, Marlene Dietrich was a monstrous mother. She was. I mean, she was fantastic in other ways, and she did incredible things to the daughter. But you've got to look at it in two different. And the daughter is always going to seek revenge in these situations. She can't help it. I mean, she's been stifled, and especially if the mother is just a superstar in that way and has lived the life that Marlene Dietrich did, and which was not motherly in any way. But there is the two things coexist: the daughter's viewpoint and the viewpoint of the world, or those who have appreciated the artistry of the mother.
Well, unfortunately, my daughter has chosen as a career a writer, so
Mummy dearest, here we
Mummy
come.
dearest.
All right.
No, she wouldn't do that.
She wouldn't do that. I don't know if he can go right to the next one. It's interesting with Bergman that he never will acknowledge that artistic achievement or the life of the intellect are a reason for living. I mean, he's so much, especially for his women. His women are not allowed to be intellectuals ever. They must be earth mothers. Don't you? This is.
Yes, in his films, but strangely enough, in reality, he's a great admirer of achievers. It doesn't have to be a high achievement, but somebody who really wants to achieve something with their life, whether they are a man or a woman. So I think in the films he's reflecting a lot of what the young boy Bergman felt about maybe his own mother, about himself, so much more in the films than it's ever in the real life. I feel that all his films, maybe with the exception of Fanny Alexander, it's been a struggle with the childhood, and suddenly he was set free, and strangely enough then he stopped making films altogether, and now he only wants to write. It's like he's found something.
His peace. Well, Best Intentions, I think, is just a marvel of coming to terms with one's parents.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yes.
Can you do the other one, Patrick, now? Is that...
Now, this was really the end of the scene, because all that shouting to the mother happened before, and obviously she has more lines than I remember the mother, but that face is a very different face Ingrid is showing than the other face we saw while she was playing theater, and it's very, very much against the text in some ways, hating to say every word of it.
Because he's humiliating her. The dialogue is completely humiliating her, and what she's having to say is humiliating.
It is. But the strange thing is, the other child you hear that says, "Mama, come, come," that is the child that is crippled and which is lying on the top floor. And both these children, I feel, in a way, they are Ingmar Bergman, the one which is absolutely unforgiving to the mother, and then the other one, which is all the time saying, "Mama, Mama, please see me." And I think it's only now in the recent years when Ingmar Bergman's own mother died, and then he read her diary and found out, so many things he never knew about her. It's only then that he finally, as you say, came to terms with who he is, because he allowed the mother to have had her own life as well, that she wasn't only on earth to be his mother and thus failing because she wasn't what he needed.
Yeah, well, and women are so much the center of his whole vision that they're going to be the negative and the positive, the idealized and the degraded. They're just that. And it's interesting that he has stopped making films now that he has come to terms. I don't know if that anguish, that's where the anguish came from, I guess, and that's what that was what the anguish issued in the film.
I think he was because he wrote all his scripts himself, and I don't think he could make a film on somebody else's script. And without that anguish, he feels this media is not more for him. He still is doing a lot of theater, and first and foremost, he is writing books and also scripts. It's really, Fanny and Alexander, which is the last film he did, he also wrote for me, and he had been, for a long time on the phone talking about this wonderful film, and now I wouldn't have to do this neurotic person anymore, and I just visualized, finally something, warm and beautiful. And then when he sent the script, the way I read it then was, oh, it's another one. I can't do these nightmares anymore. And I really did the one artistic bad choice of my life. I sent him a telegram and said, somebody else will have to do your nightmares. I don't know what went into me. And for 1.5 years, we didn't speak. And then, he understood. And I regret it, because that turned out to be his best films in many ways, because there was also something very life-affirming in the film. And I never saw the film because of this, because that would have been too, and now it irritates me, because some people say that the film I made and directed, that is so much inspired by Fanny Alexander. I haven't even seen the film, So he got his revenge without knowing it.
Well, I don't think it really is, which brings us to Sophie. And, of course, everyone wants to know, is it Bergman-esque? Is it? I don't think so. I mean, I guess the only one that it would bear any similarity to would be Fanny and Alexander, only because it's period. And it's a saga. It deals with the family. But other than that, I think it's very much your film. Should we show the clip first and then talk a little bit about it first, maybe? It's a novel. How did it come about?
Well, I got the novel, which it is based on, sent to me, and they asked me if I would do a manuscript on this novel, and I thought, that's really nice, they want me to do a film manuscript. And so I said yes, just being honored. And while working on it, and then finally finding out that I had to really make a choice, because the novel goes in so many directions, I wanting to focus on the women and her life.
It wasn't called Sophie, I take it.
No. It's really a family chronic.
Yeah.
And when I sent, my ideas to the producers, they wrote me back and said, would you like to direct it as well? Because they liked my ideas. And I thought, they must be joking. Shall I direct the film? And only on the press conference, actually, when they were announcing the film was to be made, did I realize they meant it, because they said, well, she's also going to direct it when the script is finished. And this was in Denmark, and I can remember going from the press conference to the airport and calling Ingmar and saying, "You just watch out now," because and it was so lovely. And although I had never dreamt of being a film director, after having done it, I can say that I really feel that the more than 30 years I've been an actor,
it's been a preparation.
I just feel it's been a preparation, because I feel the mixture of writing and putting your own visions up there with the help of all the wonderful people you work with, that's really where I feel most at home.
Yeah.
Also because as an actress, you know, the older you get, the more frustrated you get, because you have to sometimes work with bad directors, you have to sometimes work with bad words, and really the older you get, the harder that gets to be. And you know, since I'm not quiet anymore, and I feel sometimes I have to tell them, you know, just to be helpful, and they don't like that.
They don't welcome your suggestions.
No, but and that's why it is. And also, I think I came to the work with one of the best things a director can come with. I knew, especially from working with bad directors, what not to do, what not to say. That's very important.
Like what kinds of things?
Everything, because you ask people to work with you because you believe in their talent, because you believe in their ability to create something. So they are not supposed to, when they are to do their thing, to just do a blueprint of what you have been thinking of at home. With the actors, for example, you have to give them a wonderful blocking, a space to move in, a beautiful living room, colors, everything right, and then say, I'd like the scene to be like this and this, and then sit there and watch them create, watch them give with their face and their body and their voice what their experience is, what they have understood of that character, and then just make sure that everything you can hear or see them trying or doing expressively, that comes on the screen. You are to be there as a lover, as somebody to whom they have the trust of the world and want to open up as much as possible, because that's going to make beautiful scenes. But if you go to them and say, well, listen, now you're going to be very angry, and you know your face should really cloud over and everything, you have trampled into their fantasy life like an elephant, and you'll never get anything.
So you have to trust them, and of course casting is key to that too. The woman that plays Sophie, I've never seen her before. Who is she?
Well, she is primarily a theater actor. They're all primarily theater actors, and all of them are Danish except Erland Josephson, who plays the father of the main character. For the main character, and she has to go through 20 years, I met with a lot of actresses. And again, because I'm an actress myself, I didn't want them to go through the humiliation of having to test for me. What I knew was important was to see what kind of type they were, and when we were talking together, you know, really listen and see what kind of experience they were interested in giving to a film. And when I met her, I was very sure at once that this is the kind of woman I would love to work with. And before the film started, maybe I was nervous that because the part she's playing is something that I could have done at least before, and I was scared maybe I'm going to want her to be like me. But it never happened. It was such a joy, you know, to be on the other side of the camera and not have the ambition of, you know, getting up another feeling and show it in the face again, but having somebody else surprise you. And, you know, the wonder of seeing somebody feeling secure, feeling loved, seeing somebody bloom with the material that you have been part of giving them. It was, it's great. I can't wait to do it again. And I have such admiration for these actors that was part of this film, and everybody, in fact, connected specifically on the artistic side. You know, the set designers, they gave rooms to move in where there's so many details, and the details you cannot even see on the film, but the actors saw them, you know, and the details inspired the actors to do more. The one difficulty was with the crew, because they were the only ones I hadn't met before we started filming. And here I come. I'm middle-aged. I'm a woman. I'm an actress. That's 3 handicaps at once. Yes, and they were just ready for me. I felt that, and it took 14 days really for us to work together, because my language was different. Not because I was Norwegian and they were Danish, but because I had decided I am not going to whine, because they're going to wait for that. I'm not going to cry, and I'm not going to be bossy and things like that, because it's not in my nature. I am going to use my normal language, and there's a lot of things I don't know how to express, technique things with the camera and whatever. So I would say, I would like the camera to move slowly over there and then just stop in the dance there and go further. Stop in the dance? What are you talking about? How many centimeters, and use the right expressions here. And we had a lot of problems like that in the beginning. Or I would, say, I'm going to get some coffee. Do you want me to get you some coffee too? Is she out of her mind? Is she going to get us coffee now? It was things like that they really felt I was a little cuckoo. And then
maybe they wanted you to feel that way a little bit too.
Oh, sure, and I did. And they also did this thing that sometimes men don't know they do, and sometimes women do it too. They make you invisible. You come to them and you stand there, and you are supposed to be the one to give decisions, and they don't hear you. And they don't see you, and they continue with what they were talking about, and suddenly they have left, and you are there. I was supposed to be the boss, and they have all left, and it's very frightening. And then you can just decide to be invisible or to go after them and say, okay, maybe my language isn't so clear, but still this is the way I want it. And after 14 days, when they saw the rushes and even the cinematographer who told me in the beginning, I said, could you please make a pan there and zoom in there? He said, we don't zoom these days. We don't zoom these days. And I was so insecure. So again, I called poor Ingmar and I said, is it true? Don't they zoom in films anymore? And in the end, I have to say, the cinematographer and we were so close. This man who had said in the beginning he didn't want to pan, he didn't want to zoom, I couldn't hold him still. He was operating, he was panning, he was zooming. He had a ball, But it was really a question of power. In those 14 days, I never want to have back, I must say. But
it's the testing that they're testing you, and they create a sort of mystique that's a male mystique. This is, I think, one of the reasons so few women have been able to get into directing, because there's this idea that somehow they can't do it, that there are all these arcane terms that you have to know, which is all nonsense.
You don't need to, because that's what they are supposed to know.
Exactly.
The grades of the lamps.
That's their job.
Sure. So. But the worst thing is, it's when they make you invisible. And I would just love for people to, and my film is very much about that too, that look out. If you are close to somebody, there might be somebody over there who is needy and wants to be part of it. And I've tried in the film to give many images of this, actually, the woman, the lead woman in her very unhappy marriage, I feel that her husband, he dies. Because he dies, he's never seen. He becomes invisible. He's always on the outside. And I think it would be so great if people could.
That's very cryptic. I'd like to ask about that after we look at the clip. It's about a Jewish family, a Jewish community in turn of the century Denmark, and Sophie is, I think, 29 at the beginning, unmarried. The scene, there's a ball scene. This is not what we're going to have. We're going to have the scene where the parents go for the portrait. But there's a ballroom where a painter who is non-Jewish meets her, and without knowing she's Jewish, has a sort of
anti-Semitic,
makes an anti-Semitic remark, then tries to turn it into something else, that Jews are really the essence of he's a very attractive, dashing figure. And he then asked to meet her parents, which he does, and wants to paint them. And they represent something to him that's this completely exotic culture. And so the scene, and Sophie is herself somewhat taken with him. The scene we're going to see is when the parents, Erland Josephson, who you just saw in Scenes from a Marriage, is the father, go to have their portrait painted, and then eventually Sophie comes to see it. So can we have that clip?
I'm really proud of that film, I have to tell you.
You should be. It's amazing. It's hard to believe it's your first feature film, the performances you get. There are others, there were so many things we could have shown, but there's a scene where later on, Jonas, the man who will become Sophie's husband, comes to pay his first call. And the parents are sitting, as they always are, and they have this wonderful marriage, which is another thing. You feel the disintegration of the whole Jewish community here, and of this kind of marriage that Sophie hopes to have and fails. She's had, well, no, that's later, but so Jonas comes to call, and he's the parents' choice, actually, and she doesn't know this, and he comes in, and it turns out he plays the piano, and they ask him to play, and Sophie says, oh yes, do please play. And so he's playing along, and she's standing behind the piano looking pleased and enjoying the music. And she looks at the parents, then she keeps looking fairly pleased. Then she looks at him again, and suddenly her whole expression changes, and she suddenly understands why he's here. And it's like her whole fate is sealed in that moment. At least this is the way I see
absolutely,
it.
Yeah.
She knows she's going to marry him, and everything is over in a way. I mean, she doesn't know that. She hopes that it will be a good marriage, but she doesn't even need to ask the parent. There's no point in arguing.
It's all in her
expression.
Face. Yeah, which I think is wonderful. That's a wonderful thing with film, as opposed to theater, that you can take away all the words and all the explanations, and you just put a camera on a face, and if that face knows how to express, which this actress does, you know, you read a life in a face, and actually you recognize it because it's happened to you too.
Yeah, but it's a very subtle thing too. I mean, it's not obvious, and it's for sophisticated audiences. That's what concerns me. I mean, I think this is not going to make it with people that go to see.
Oh, I'm sure it
Hollywood
will.
films.
Yes, it's a movie with maybe another rhythm than a lot of movies, because I also wanted to remind people of the pace we are really born to. Our pace is really much more like this. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then something there and something there. And this is also 100 years ago, when obviously the pace was even slower. But I do believe so much in audiences that I know if they sit together just like we do now, and it's dark there and something is happening there, and if they allow the time and they know, okay, now it's 2 hours and 20 minutes of my life, if they allow them to lean back and sit there, this pace, which is part of us all, is lingering within us, and I'm sure we are even longing for it. If that can just invade your soul and things can take their time, it's going to be exciting and fulfilling, and I wanted to do that. And I have to say my producers were very brave because they allowed me. And it has turned out it's not for sophisticated people or intelligent people or this or that. It's for all that too, but it's really made with the heart, and it's made for the heart, nothing else. Just go right to the heart. Mm-hmm. And so I believe tremendously in movie houses still being one of the few places where people can have this
and you have
experience.
Faith that your audience will understand. They will see the scope. I mean, what's interesting is you see different generations, and you see people leaving. There are a lot of scenes where people are always leaving, which is what life is, saying goodbye to people.
But we've all had it happening to us, and we all know it's going to come in the future, and in the end we're going to leave ourselves. So there's nothing in this film that isn't experienced daily one way or another by everyone. Who of us experienced being in the jungle meeting Rambo? None of us. It's you know, it's It's not going to give anything to our life. It's not recognizable. And the most wondrous moments of our lives, when we look back at it, wasn't the big explosions. It was really those moments when we were recognized, or when we were touched, or when we touched somebody, or felt some skin under our hands. That is the things we remember, the goodbyes and the hellos.
I'm going to ask one more thing, and then we're going to open it to questions. But there's one interesting thing in the film, which it starts out being about Sophie, but there's a tension between the woman's experience and the Jewish experience, because, of course, this is a very patriarchal culture, and ultimately it's Sophie's son who goes out into the world. There's an irony there, too, of the Jewish hope for assimilation, hoping that that is the future for them. And, of course, we know from the war that it wasn't, and what is going to happen. But Sophie starts out full of hope, but there's a line in there somewhere about, and the Josephson character is always going to his cafe. This is part of his daily ritual where he reads the newspaper and he knows what's going on in the world, and the women are always at home. And some line about a woman that stays at home never has anything interesting to say. So you're very aware, I think, of the constraints on women, but somehow, I mean, Sophie's story, suddenly it becomes really the story of the son.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I do believe that a woman who stays at home and has made that choice has a lot of interesting things to say, unless she's just sitting and watching soap operas. But they didn't do that at that time. It is Sophia who says that she's saying that, you know, a woman who only is sitting there with her knitting and that's it. Out from that knitting is not coming any deep thoughts. But she, in a way, is wrong, because Sophia's life did not become a life of somebody who left the home. But in her life, she actually evolved a lot. Yeah. She started to write. She read a lot. She put a lot of wisdom into her son, I believe, in what she was telling him, among other things, never to forget his roots. And then she did something wonderful that I must say I didn't do, who have been so liberated kind of all my life. When my child was leaving home, you know, my child saw a really crying mother, and if I could have given her guilt on the way for leaving me, I would have done it. I couldn't, because she knew that I had been working and would have a life also when she left. But I cried and I said, maybe you're too young, maybe you should wait, and whatever. Although she was, more than 20. But what Sophia did, who had stayed home all her life and also married who her parents said and led the life that she was asked to lead, when the time came for her son, and she had pictured the two of them living in harmony, and he would come home and she could make a home for him also as a young man. And she says, isn't it good? Now it's the two of us and we will have a wonderful life together. And he said, no, I want to leave. You know, maybe it was right for you, your life, but it's not right for me. And at the moment when her life, her dreams are kind of being crushed.
She has nothing else, really.
She has nothing else, in a way, we have been led to believe. But when he stands there in the hall with his suitcases and suddenly is a little boy and, regretting that he's leaving home, what does she do? She says, happy voyage, and she pushes him out of the door. And this was not in the book, but I wanted to give it to my daughter, and I wanted to give it to Sophia. I just think it is so wonderful.
That
she
heroic
pushes,
thing of letting go. That is the hardest and the most beautiful thing that either child or a parent can do. I mean, it's what in Autumn Sonata they couldn't do.
No.
But here she does.
But it's terribly hard. And if that is all one can do, maybe from one generation to the next, to do just one more thing that helps set somebody
Well, it's the greatest
free.
act of love in a way there is, if a mother can actually let her child go, let her separate from
But
her.
it sure is hard,
Well, with the little time that we have left, let's have some questions from the audience. Yes.
A little bit about your capacity for anguish and how you didn't want to do another nightmare, and Fanny and Alexander Could you talk a little bit about the emotional toll it took to make a movie like Cries and Whispers and Face to Face? Coming home at night, was it hard? After the shooting was over, did you have to recover? What kind of experience was that?
Well, because it's kind of wonderful to do, to cry and to have all these hysterics. You get a lot of, frustrations out that way. And I have never been that kind of actress who, did the method and had to sit home and contemplate suicide to be able to do it on film. I always thought the fun of acting is when the camera comes on, there I come on, and when it goes off, Liv is having a wonderful time, and I to me that is important, and I always have a kind of suspicion towards actors who are using a lot of strength, pretending, when the camera's off, like they are so deep into it. I don't believe that, because you really use up a lot of energy, which you will not have once you are supposed to have the energy. So no, it's not an emotional strain. On the contrary, it's. I think acting is fun. I thought it was more fun when I was younger, but it's fun. What a work to have! It's all of us did it as children, and for some of us to have it as a profession, we are really very lucky, I think.
Yes. Earlier, you said you were so identified with the Bergman clan of actors, and you said you wonder what you might have been. What's your I wish list if you could have gone in a completely different screen persona? What would that be?
Well, I always thought I was a comedy actress, but I never did that on the theater or films. Actually, I did one film, 40 Carats, but that was really not very successful. And that couldn't be a comedy the way it was set up, because I was to be a 40-year-old, very sophisticated New York woman and fall in love with a 20-year-old. And at that time, I was 30, and I came right out of Norway with a heavy accent, and the one I fell in love with, who was to be 20, was 29, Eddie Albert, and we looked the same age. So, it was self-defying. And
I remember you told me at the time, because we talked about that, and you said since they instead of trying to make you look old, they tried to make you look old, but instead of making you look old, they just made you look ugly.
Yes. Frumpy, yes.
Yes.
In Sophie, the precisely what you were talking about before you opened the question, wasn't there was this scene in which her mother prepares her for the son leaving. Am I not right?
Yes.
She says, your son will do.
Be careful.
What you haven't done.
So your son, yeah. And that's another scene. There are a lot of scenes that are not in the book, but that came out because were things I felt was important to say, and I felt it was still, part of what the writer wouldn't have minded. And that scene happened because the woman who plays Sophia, the lead actress, and the one who plays her mother, Gita Nörby, and we were sitting talking about, just before the shooting started, our mothers, and how our mothers had been very strong always and made decisions for us, and so I decided that I'd make a scene in the film where Sophia finally does tell her mother that she feels the mother has kind of limited her choices in life, and they wanted that too. And while I was writing this, I got a telephone call from my daughter, blaming me for something that I felt I was not responsible for. And suddenly, I was on the mother's side. There is some unfairness here. So the scene starts with the daughter rebelling towards the mother, but it does in fact end taking the mother's side, saying, okay, I did mistakes. I admit that. As a mother, I've done mistakes. But don't now in the upbringing of your own child, because that's what my daughter said too. I'm never going to say that to my son or whatever. I don't. And so the mother says, "Be careful, so you while trying to avoid everything I did wrong, be careful then that doesn't put you into, doing things, directing your own son. I like that scene very much.
So then his leaving, she was in some, at least I felt, that she was very psychically prepared for his leaving. Not so. She heard the words, but probably yes, it was somewhere inside of her. But I don't think she was ever aware that her mother would be right about that thing. Like when the son is learning to read, and she's just sitting admiring him that he can read, and he's reading about 6 million people dying in India of starvation. It's the same number. She's a Jewish mother, and she's just smiling because her son knows how to read. She doesn't even hear what he's saying. But again, that's another number, another thing about destiny that you don't hear, but somewhere it stays within you. And Sophie's children would be maybe, or her son, maybe one of the 6 million who died in the Second World War.
Speaking of that, you've been involved in a lot of international activities in UNICEF and refugee children, also with Jewish causes and activities. Was it just coincidence that this was a Jewish subject, you have an affinity there? How did that come about?
Well, I always wondered why they asked me to do this special subject, because I'm a Christian and I'm Norwegian, and it's a story about a Jewish family in Denmark. But there has come to me this way a lot of things that has been tied up with the Jewish community. I think that in many ways they have represented a people that through centuries, maybe more than any, has been persecuted just because of where they come from through history. So maybe they are the best example of what we do without understanding in terms of who is different from ourselves. And this is also why I have dedicated the picture to my own grandson, Halfdan, who is Christian, and my husband's grandchild, Tali, who is Jewish, hoping that when they grow up one day, that differences will be something to be celebrated, not persecuted.
In the beginning of the film, when the family is moving around this very opulent room and all kinds of signs of wealth. And then as the movie went on and after the artist came in, he had met her at a very gay event, people in very strong post. Then they went to his studio, and he was in the colors of, I think, the Norwegian flag or whatever, blue and yellow. The artist who had made the anti-Semitic, and then he painted a picture and read it in the end where the lady, Sophie, and he are bidding over this picture that he created. And through the picture, in the film, I saw part of what you had just talked about. And I was wondering if it was a conscious effort to put the people of the earth, very simple, very, and the artist in a kind of a corrupted persona.
Well, there are so many things you put into a film that maybe people do not see, and then the strange thing, what happens is that there are a lot of things that you did not see that people see, that also are very true. And I think that's the most wonderful thing with art, that you are allowed to give it your own interpretation, because it is what you recognize. And of course, very much in the film is comments about being an artist and what do people recognize as art, or what do they recognize in art.
Yes, one more question, I guess.
Yesterday, the newspaper here alluded to something that I've wondered about for years, having been in Norway and knowing something about the culture there and the culture here. And that is whether you could have flourished as much as an actress in Hollywood, or could have made a film like Sophie, could have directed a film being a Hollywood actress, like being a Norwegian in America.
Well, I don't know. Hollywood and I kind of didn't strike it out too well. And in many ways, I am so lucky for that. And it's not sour grapes, because, of course, if they had loved me, I would have stayed. And if I had been a big movie star, maybe I would have been happy then too. But I do doubt it, and I doubt that I would have had such a fantastic, rich life as I've had. To write books, to travel for the United Nations, and have to overcome certain things, and the freedom of choice that I've had, because I don't have to look at box office, because there isn't any box office anyway in my life, but instead then do what feels right for me, is what the no from Hollywood gave me. And the yes from where I am working did include Sophia, and obviously a picture like Sophia I could never have made in Hollywood. Maybe I would have been, so big that I could have made another movie, but it wouldn't have been Sophia. And I know had I lived in Hollywood, I wouldn't even have known that well, the story of Sophia, because I needed a lot of reality, which I've had, thanks to the rejection.
I'm curious, what the budget on Sophia was, but I also have another question for you. Having interacted with a recognized genius for 20 years, I'm curious about your perception of American artists now in the film industry. Is there anyone you perceive in script writing, directing, and acting? Do you perceive any geniuses on the scene right now in America from your perspective, having been involved with one for so long?
Well, the budget of the film was $2 million, which of course is very, very little, because it's a big period piece. And we didn't go a day, an hour over time, or even over budget. Sometimes when I call Ingmar Bergman a genius, I'm a little flippant. I think he's a great, great filmmaker, and he will stay in film history as one of the very best. I'm very scared of thinking of anybody as geniuses, because I think a life includes everything, wholeness. And some people excel in their work, and some people excel just in one action. And it's dangerous to be surrounded and honoring geniuses too much, because it may make us listen too much to them and turn away from other things that also might be positive in our lives. He's one of my very best friends. He's the father of my child. Obviously, I think he's a great man. I don't believe in geniuses.
What about people that you might really think their work is of a high caliber in the American films and writing or directing or acting?
I'm afraid of mentioning names, because I might, forget somebody that I really admire. I think Ullman, I think his film Players was just wonderful. Scorsese. I'm so terrible with names. And also, there's one thing that doesn't follow. I came from Norway yesterday, so I'm on what they call jet lag. So I know there are certain names that would slip me. I think Woody Allen has made some wonderful films. I love John Cassavetes. There are several.
And you're in the middle of Unforgiven.
Oh, yes, yes, I am. Clint Eastwood. I think, what a career, to be associated with what they call spaghetti movies. And I'm sure he has some of the handicaps, that I would have had being middle-aged and actress and whatever. What is he? He's even more than middle-aged and you cowboy and actor and whatever. And look what he's doing. Look what's in that man. And this film, Unforgiving. Yes, it's just incredible. And I bet you, if it hadn't been made by Clint Eastwood, but by some other certified genius, it would have been called a work of a genius.
Well, not many male actor-directors would do that, would play a broken-down cowboy.
No.
That's something goes against the grain of, of the mythology.
Yeah. So both his acting and the choice and his directing is really good.
Are we allowed to go on any longer? Where are the powers that be? Here's another question.
When are you going to do a comment?
When somebody asks me, but they don't.
Yes?
I just wanted to say, it seems that most of the people that ask me questions have been men, and maybe it's just hard for women to talk in large groups. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to say I saw Sophie last night, and from one woman to another, it was just an absolutely life-affirming movie. It was absolutely beautiful, I think.
Thank you.
And then I wanted to ask, like, all the personal strength it must be to become a director after 30 years, 20 years as an actress, and in many ways in a male-dominated one. Just where that inner strength and the certainty of what you want to do and you go for it, like, how do you get it?
Well, it has a lot to do with sisterhood too, and that we finally that we dare to talk. As I said, I started out a non-talker and really so shy and timid, and I have found great strength in other women, talking to them, and also other men that thought I was okay, and we shouldn't be scared of each other. We should really evaluate each other.
Where have been Sophie be seen by those listening?
Well, it has just been bought by an American distributor, and so Arrow Film, and so hopefully it will come back here.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you all.